And maybe that's why my early movies were all about you. My early movies were all soliciting you, making you my partners, thinking about you behind the camera, thinking what would turn you on, what would get you excited, what would make you laugh, what would make you scream. How could I create suspense out of whole cloth when that darn shark never worked?
Steven Spielberg. Is there any director's name more household? Any filmmaker more directly associated with Silver Age American cinema? Any still living visual artist who's more prolific? Over the decades, Mr. Spielberg has not only firmly cemented himself as a household name, but as a family name. It seems, at this point, that no matter how old you are, if you watch movies, you grew up with Spielberg movies. Adventure fare like Hook. Yeah, and Indiana holy crap. And who doesn't love Jurassic Park? Okay, wow. That's... How did this guy get a reputation for being so soft? Rhetorical question, of course. We've all been exposed to our fair share of Spielberg ham with a side of John Williams, but what's surprising is the number of his mainstream or even so-called family-friendly films that contain scenes just as, if not more terrifying than what you'd see in your typical horror film. Now, obviously, Mr. Spielberg dipped his toe into what was inarguably horror in the early days of his career, because who didn't, right? Duel was a great show of his burgeoning low-budget talents, and of course Jaws was and is a legendary classic that speaks for itself. These two films alone show that even that early on, Spielberg possessed the will and the skill to viscerally affect his viewers. And just 3 years after Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind reads, through this lens, as a sort of transitionary period between his hardcore former methods and the more well-rounded, familiar style that he'd come to be known for. Any movie with aliens creeping just outside the frame, mere feet from a little boy alone in a farmhouse, is gonna contain some major creep factor. But the best Spielberg horror scene to feature children comes from an even more famous film of his. Debatably, his most famous, Jurassic Park. This film adapted Michael Crichton's admittedly clinical novel about a dinosaur amusement park, commercializing it into the groundbreaking classic that we all know. The film has a healthy handful of horror-esque scenes, ranging from Ellie's raptor attack featuring Mr. Arnold's severed arm, the amazingly well-executed but more thrilling than actually scary T-Rex paddock scene, all the way to the opening with the unfortunate worker. However, the scene that is some undeniable Spielberg horror is one that I've always referred to as Raptors in the Kitchen. There is nothing, not a thing, more frightening than being trapped with these vicious killers. The scene ups the ante though, because it's not just any characters trapped, it's children, which either makes a general audience member worry more for the sake of the children, or more terrified when they project themselves, now as children, into the scene. This entire cat and mouse game is a nail-biter of the highest order. Sure, the very honorably mentioned T-Rex paddock scene has the kids in danger too, but they've got adults around as protectors, or at least distractions. Also, the vision is based on movement gimmick gives them a way to consistently protect themselves. Plus, I don't know about you, but to me, there's something much more terrifying about being stalked by something closer to your size. They can follow and find you just so much easier, especially in this case when it's revealed just how smart these damn things are. Not only do they open the kitchen door, but they call for help to search more efficiently. Pitting kids, clever kids, but still kids, against the most dangerous and intelligent creatures on the island makes for the scariest and most effective scene in a classic full of amazing, memorable set pieces. And that's just speaking to the tension, entirely ignoring the tireless work that went into the effects, both practical and fledgling CGI. Speaking of CGI and our man Steven, one of his lesser respected films, War of the Worlds, doesn't really need any for its most effective horror scene. The film is full, hell, chock full of it, and there's a few scenes of the tripods that work very well, don't get me wrong. Anytime the sound design really focuses up on the otherworldly scale of the scenes unfolding, it's scary as hell, at least to me. But, as they often do, an old, albeit paraphrased proverb rings truer than any other. We are the monsters we fear. Now, just to give a touch of context, the film adapts and contemporizes the H.G. Wells novel and 50s film of the same name, detailing an insurmountable alien invasion, in this case through the eyes of a humble Chicago family who, thanks to a hunch paying off, happen to have what appears to be the only working non-military vehicle around. However, this only working car thing draws a lot of attention when they come upon a crowd of tired, angry, and scared refugees traveling down the road one rainy night. As I'm sure you can guess, things get bad pretty quick.
Why'd you do that? Why is he doing that?
This is dark stuff. Maybe it's how suddenly things go from bad to worse. Or maybe it's the way Spielberg completely removes music, leaving us alone with the sounds of rain and human fear.
Sorry, I can't. Please, get away from the car.
Or maybe still it's how Rachel's innocent lack of understanding, her questions,
Why'd you do that?
help to conceptualize just how inhuman what's going on really
Why
is.
is he doing that?
He wants a ride, Rachel. Everybody just wants a ride.
Can we give him one?
One element that has no maybes involved is Spielberg's use of a time-tested trick from horror classics. It might not seem it at first, but this is a true case of what you don't see being worse than what you do. In a Tobe Hooper-style stroke of directing brilliance, Spielberg lets our minds fill in the darkest moments of this scene. All of the most explicit violence occurs off-screen or out of focus. So many people acting out of such intense fear creates this unstoppable tidal wave that leaves our characters broken and us breathless. War of the Worlds gets a bit of a bum rep for being a sellout or just another remake or whatever, but in my humble opinion, this scene alone is disturbing enough to make the price of admission worth it, and elevates the picture well out of the pit of forgettability it's been cast into. Okay, geez, let's get a little happier, shall we? And really, who isn't a fan of Indiana Jones? Just Nazis and commies, that's who. With Indy, all four of his current outings at least touch on this dark edge, some to greater lasting effect than others. But it's really no surprise that the first of the four has the most effective Spielberg horror scene, and I'm sure you know the one I mean. For the very few who don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the globe-trotting adventure story of archaeologist Henry Indiana Jones and his companions. They travel the world, solve ancient riddles, and fight a Nazi-funded effort to find the lost Ark of the Covenant, said to contain
Power of God or something.
It's a thrilling adventure, one of the very best of its kind. In the end, Indy and his tough-as-nails sidekick Marion are captured by the villains, who now possess the Ark. They're tied up back to back, awaiting their fate as the villains attempt to open the relic. Now, something to keep in mind is that up until this moment, nothing overtly supernatural has occurred in the film. There have been death-defying action scenes, over-the-top traps, and other such adventure tropes, but no monsters, ghosts, or anything so blatant. Then, this happens. I mean, look at this. Look at this. This canonizes the so-called superstitious aspects of the journey that Indy himself wrote off,
I don't believe in magic, a lot of superstitious hocus pocus.
and surprises the hell out of a first-time viewer. It's this shock that helps sell the moment, and makes it both terrifying and so iconic. It just goes so hardcore. I mean, people die in the film, but not like this. Not to this gruesome degree. In fact, sidebar, these three deaths were so intense that in order to dodge an R rating, Spielberg had to add that foreground fire in post, because I guess fire makes it less disturbing somehow. On that note of, disturbing, I'd like to round out this topic by discussing the horrific elements that Mr. Spielberg utilized in the two films of his that brought home Academy Awards, Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List. Respectively being the military and civilian sides of the same World War II coin, these two films happen to be the only two in his oeuvre to net him the highest honors, neither of which while ignoring his horror roots. Now, someone may scoff, that's not horror at this particular suggestion, but the funny thing is, Spielberg might agree with me. This is a man who has very strong opinions about the Second World War.
And to the 6 million who can't be watching this among the 1 billion watching this telecast tonight. Thank you.
And the history around it, who, where appropriate, wants to use it to shock you. Both of these films use terrifying, visceral subjectivity to force the viewer to personally experience their most gut-wrenching moments. One puts you in the boots of a soldier in the European theater, while the other rips the shoes off your feet and sends you to a camp to die. For the raid on the Warsaw Ghetto, we play it mostly handheld, among the soldiers and the people losing everything, and never out of earshot of the Nazis shouting commands. And I don't believe I even need to go into detail of the dehumanization that we bear witness to in those camps. Saving Private Ryan doubles down on this raw sound design, bombarding us with explosions and the cries of grown men to really get us into that headspace. Spielberg's choice to adorn historical drama in scenes of genuine horror, real horror painstakingly recreated, mind you, is bold. And that's boldness that comes from a place of true reverence. Steven Spielberg, being the human tentpole of the industry that he is, literally has to know what he's doing by now. And anyone that sure of their craft knows never to refuse a tool in their tool belt. In this case, that tool is knowing how to scare your audience, but not too much. Never so much that you overshadow the spirit of the film or make someone walk out or, God forbid, take to Twitter in disgust, but just enough to accentuate the stakes or propel the story where needed. Spielberg knows that to keep an audience hooked, to really make sure that they're paying attention across a runtime of all the fun, approachable, crowd-pleasing material that he's known for, sometimes, even just for a short while, you've just got to scare the hell out of them.
Thank you very much.
Kids get scared.
What's to be scared about? Just a little hiccup in the power.
I didn't say I was scared.
I didn't say you were scared.
I know.